Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Frontier Indica Podcast. And for the first time ever, we actually have like a real breathing guest on our show. And this is a really special guest because unlike most of us, most of you guys who are probably watching this, and most of the people who I talk to on Twitter and other social media, the guest we have today is actually living in the UK, and his family's been living in the UK for a very long time. From his father's side of the family, they are basically third generation. He's a third generation British Indian or British Hindu, have you? And I'm really glad that he's here with us today to share some stories about his life and how the immigrant story for his family has been in the UK, and and a couple of other things, because we're always curious to really know how it actually is for Indians and Hindus who have been living abroad for so long, and how they've had to fit in, and how do they continue with their traditions and cultural practices. What day-to-day problems do they face, and what are the kind of opinions that they have over about things which are happening right here back at home. So yeah, Sood, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. It's great that we can do this.
Yeah, sure. We'll just get straight into it, and I guess the first question I'd like to ask you is how has your family's journey as an immigrant family, as an immigrant Hindu family from India, been in the UK? When did you guys migrate, and what sort of experience did your family and even you grow while growing up had? And what are the things that you appreciate about that, and what are the things which you would classify as, let's say, hurdles or problems?
Yeah. So to give a bit of background about myself, about my yeah, to provide a bit of my family's background. My Dadaji and Dadiji came over here in the early '60s
Right,
to London,
right.
and had my dad shortly after. So my dad was the eldest of four. So he and
Okay,
his siblings all grew up in London.
okay, right,
Um, in moved around to different parts of the city.
okay,
But yeah, overall, they were living in quite, I guess, relative poverty, in a sense. They initially.
right,
So for whatever, it seems that whatever wealth they had back home didn't really, translate uh,
right,
to any kind of affluence over here.
right, right,
Um, so and with both of my grandparents working quite long hours in, or yeah, working long hours in factories,
right, right,
producing kind of all kinds of things. They
right,
eventually were able to you know become
right,
homeowners,
right,
and eventually had quite a good house, in a good
right,
area.
right.
So um, yeah, so my dad and his siblings uh, all grew up here.
Right.
Um, my dad later married my mom, who was born in Delhi.
Okay.
So um,
Right.
yeah, she came over, living in
Okay.
effectively a joint family
Right.
uh, with my dad's younger brother and his wife, um,
Okay.
in as well as my grandparents.
Okay.
So um, so yeah, it's I guess my uh, kind of frame of reference is kind of how could I say it? On one hand, my mom's an immigrant to this country.
Right.
Um,
Right.
Meanwhile, my dad was very much
Right.
him and his siblings kind of strategy in a sense to kind of getting on over here was very much one of assimilation
Right.
and
Right.
um, that's kind of uh, yeah, that
So,
they
if you don't mind me asking, so do you
uh,
feel that that from your mom's side, the more recent sort of immigrant background has kind of helped you stay more in touch with your native culture?
overall I would say yes, yeah, no, definitely, because
Right.
it was with my mom. Obviously, I was she was she made I guess fairly frequent trips back home,
Okay.
uh, once a year, or at the most, or at the
Right.
least once every 2 years.
Okay.
So at least I had an exposure to I guess life back home in a sense,
Right.
uh,
Right.
which my cousins on in my dad's side of the family, being born to, yeah, so there's 11 of us in total, and
Okay.
uh, with the
11
exception of me,
cousins.
that's right, first
Right.
cousins.
Right.
So with the exception of me and my brother, they were born to British Hindu parents. Like both of their parents being born over here. So
Okay.
um,
Okay.
uh, yeah, that I think those kind of frequent trips to India in my childhood,
Right.
that actually I was, yeah, that at least provided some
Right. Right.
guess some more exposure to my culture.
So,
And
yeah, yeah, go on, go on.
yes, no, I was just gonna say, to add a bit more context as well, to my dad and his siblings upbringing. There was at the time of them growing up, they were, the kind of I think, especially in the 70s,
Right.
the kind of overall, where they grew up in the East End of London, there was a lot of racial tension and a
Okay.
lot of far right. There was particularly
Okay.
a particular uh, far right nationalist group called the National Front, who
Right.
they actually had neighbors belonging
Oh, wow.
uh, to that group. So
Right.
I know that there was you know bricks through the window on occasion.
Right.
Um uh, things. I've only heard. I mean, for
Yeah,
um,
that sounds like absolutely horrific, man. Like I'm sure the situation is completely different right now. But
it's totally different nowadays.
yeah, yeah. But like one can only imagine like 4 decades, decades ago, when the immigrant community also was probably much smaller than it is today,
mm,
and there were not a lot of ways to stay. Like right now we can like talk for free over the internet, and you can like any relative or any person is just like a call away or something like that.
uh,
Yeah, that time it wasn't so easy to stay connected, and already you have these small communities of immigrants feeling isolated and probably taken advantage of as well, I'm sure, by many unscrupulous people like employers and even government officials. And then on top of that, if you have to deal with with neighbors who
uh,
are racists and extremists, and it must have been a pretty tough adjustment.
Yeah, it must have been. So, um, I've with regards to what I mentioned before about the kind of I guess overall strategy being to kind of assimilate,
Right,
into kind of society over here. I've been in the past, and still, I guess, very critical of that, because it has come with the kind of
right,
it has come at the expense of maintaining um, uh, maintaining culture and more so religion.
right,
So
right,
um, so I mean, to be frank, in my dad, you would find very little that you could identify as Hindu.
okay,
Whereas, um, and this is kind of along with other things, been a kind of a catalyst, or has been kind of I guess given me fuel to kind of reclaim my roots in a sense.
right,
Having
right,
seen the kind of just I guess the kind of uh, downsides
right.
uh, to
But
uh,
Sood, I just wanted to interject because I just wanted to ask a related question to what you're talking about. So
sure.
yeah, so I was just kind of curious to know. So what was roughly the ethnic or demographic makeup of the kind of neighborhood you grew up in? I think that you call them boroughs, if I'm not wrong.
Right. So our borough in London is it has a high particularly there's a significant Indian and there are significant Indian and Pakistani populations in
Right,
this particular
right,
borough.
right,
So where we are now, we've been here for more or less the duration of my life. My parents moved from a neighboring borough um,
right,
uh,
right.
to here, quite early on in my childhood. So that's when we
Okay,
actually the joint family effectively disbanded, and
right,
we went our separate ways.
right,
Um, so what happened was, yeah. So I mean, this particular area has as I said, a high.
right.
In fact, there's more recently many Bangladeshis in this area as well. So
Okay,
uh, overall,
right,
there's a very significant, you could say, South Asian population in this area.
right,
Um,
right. So, but
it,
like, so apart from the Bangladeshis, is it mainly I'm guessing Indian Hindus and Sikhs,
that's yeah, correct, yeah,
right? So,
and and a large and unfortunately increasing number of yeah, as I said, Bangladeshis and
right, right, right.
Pakistan as well.
But while you're growing up, so you must have had like probably a lot more Indian origin Hindu Sikh classmates and neighbors and all. So do you think compared to the previous generation, let's say your dad's generation, that is in a way helped you stay more in touch with your original culture? Do you think that's also been like a driving factor?
It's definitely been a driving factor because yeah, two of my closest friends I mean, my primary school education, so from the ages of 4 till 11.
Right.
uh the school I went to was I guess at that time probably around 50%. um I would say around 50% white British,
Okay.
and 50% um various ethnic minorities,
Right.
of which I guess Hindus and Sikhs uh, were around half
Okay.
of that,
Right.
so a quarter total.
Right.
These are just kind of approximate figures, but
Right.
um, yeah. So and actually, I did. was very much, I'm mixed with people of all ethnic backgrounds,
Right. Right.
in school days.
Right.
But yeah, I did have, particularly close friends who were Hindu. So
Okay. Right.
yeah, and yeah, so actually, so uh, yeah, through I think particularly through those friends, two of them in particular, I had a lot of, I guess, a lot more, having spent time with their families. I guess, got more of a,
Right.
or
Right.
having spent time in their homes and with their
Right.
families. I
Right.
guess, that provided me more of like a kind of a
Right.
broader
Right.
context for me to kind of
Right.
identify myself within
Right.
as a
Right.
Hindu.
Right. So, Sood, like you mentioned that you did have like a lot of people from the Indian, like the immigrant community from the Indian subcontinent,
Mm.
especially a lot of Hindus and Sikhs. So, but even if we, let's say, go beyond school hours, were there any sort of cultural associations or temple committees or something like that where like not just the kids. I mean, like entire families would kind of get together, or maybe there'd be some kind of interaction regarding Hinduism, or even like in general Indian culture.
Sure. So overall, with my family being, I guess, overall quite non-traditional, I wasn't getting much of that through them.
Right. Right.
Um, I was very fortunate to have a friend in my school who, one day invited me along to a shaka of HSS. So
Right.
HSS is um, effectively sister organization of RSS, which
Right.
is there
Right.
operates in
It's
all
the
countries.
Hindu Swayam Sevak Sangh, basically.
Exactly,
Right.
that's right. So he and his older brother had been attending this shaka for quite local to us for some time,
Right.
um, and he asked me along one day, so I went along. Actually, I didn't, I kind of attended on and off for about 4 years from the ages of 10 to 14, I would say.
Wow. So
Um,
I'm guessing. So was that like a weekly thing or a monthly thing, or like?
it was a weekly
Okay.
thing, so attendance on Sundays, we would meet in
Right.
a local park, and
Right. And
it was,
yeah, and what sort of activities did they sort of organize for you guys?
so HSS, the HSS Shaka is, I think, overall quite similar to an RSS one. So we
Okay.
do various physical activity. I was introduced to uh, I guess basic
Right.
yogasana over there.
Right.
We'd practice Surya Namaskar,
Right.
um, and in addition to that, we'd there, a lot of games based around Hindu stories.
Right.
Uh, so, and as well as just general kind of cultural transmission through storytelling,
Right.
uh, and yeah, so that was actually quite like those were quite foundational experiences for me.
Of course. Right.
Although you know overall I wasn't able to make too much sense of, I guess, with me living quite I guess a life where I was very much being pushed in school to to excel, and
Right. Right.
at home my kind of overall uh, way of being was quite avoidant, spending a lot of time on computer and video games.
Right.
Um, guess I wasn't able to fully integrate my experiences there into,
Of course.
the other spheres of my life.
Right.
So actually it wasn't until more recently, maybe I'm only talking a few years back, where I was able to reflect on those experiences and
Right.
just
Right.
bring them into
Right.
um into my my sort of
Right.
life now, actually understand how they impacted me, how
Right.
uh, and how they continue to kind of influence me. So
Right.
uh, yeah, that was a big deal. And
Right.
through them, we do a lot of, we'd have a lot of activity at the our local mandir, which is
Okay.
um,
Right. So compared to the view that people in India have of RSS shakas is that obviously they are part of the same umbrella ideological uh, grouping from which the BJP also comes. So, so the way that there is a kind of direct political link between politics and the RSS, do you kind of also feel that the HSS shaka where you were going as a child, were these shakas also talking about a political ideology a lot, or about politics back in India?
actually no, yeah. So yeah, so I don't recall actually getting having much exposure to
Right,
to anything regarding
right,
Indian politics.
okay,
Um, so uh, yeah, basically no.
right, right.
I
So,
guess I guess our Shaka, most of our attendees were quite sort of young children like myself, and
right,
um, I guess probably, yeah, maybe not the brightest either. So
right,
uh,
right,
the Swayam Savak who led the session, uh, he was somebody who obviously kind of progressed through the ranks of the organization
right,
in some sense. But to be honest, I don't know too much about the organizational structure, and what
right,
was the kind of prerequisites to actually advance, and
right,
how much that is the overall kind of
right,
uh,
right,
aim of HSS UK,
right,
So yeah, I guess a lot of their thinking would be,
right,
uh, I guess, to be as relevant to the
right,
British Hindu experience as
right,
possible.
right. So I mean, I guess then I suppose, considering that, I think it's more relevant to keep a conversation directed specifically about what the local atmosphere has been for the British Hindu community. So considering that, we'll move on to the next question. So the next question is going to be more specifically about that. And so
Mm.
I'd just like to ask you, what do you think is the state of inter-ethnic and inter-religious relations between the British Hindu community and, let's say, communities like British Muslims, British Sikhs, and especially native white British people?
So overall, I think it's not in a good state by any means.
Okay,
Um, and I would say a lot of that comes down to a lack of willingness amongst us to kind of I guess to stand up and be counted, to
right,
represent ourselves as a kind of uh, a kind of on a kind of unified front
right, right,
in any real kind of tangible form.
right,
So um, but yeah, interestingly on that matter, just regarding being kind of unified, there was
right,
something interesting happened at the time of I think we're looking back to um, sort of start to mid of last year now. at the time of trying to remember. I can't remember when the general election was exactly, but
Right.
uh, the Labour Party over here actually published in their manifesto um, something regarding uh, Kashmir, which
Oh yeah.
and
Yes. Right. Right. Right.
yeah, so they said something about intervening in Kashmir,
Yeah.
which
I think they were calling for some sort of UN intervention, or the right of self determination for Kashmir and all of that.
that's
Uh,
right.
yeah, and if I remember, I read about it in the news that I think there was a Labour Party conference where they did this. They passed a resolution saying that Kashmiris have the right to self determination, and all that kind of nonsense.
That's
So
right. Yeah,
yeah,
so that's what they did,
right,
and there was a huge uproar,
right,
understandably amongst British Hindus.
right,
Uh,
right,
we kind of saw this as a I guess a clear indication as to
right,
uh, the in many respects the kind of extent to which uh, uh, Pakistani Muslim communities or communities in this country are exerting their influence on that particular party,
right,
who it seems like for quite a long time now has considered them to be a kind of a reliable vote bank.
right,
So
right,
and obviously to the total kind of exclusion of our interests
right,
as
right.
so
Do you think this particular incident actually has pushed British Hindus further towards the conservatives?
I would say so,
Okay,
uh, definitely.
right,
So just on that note, obviously regarding us being somewhat kind of unified, there was a total of in excess of 100 British Hindu organizations who signed a letter um,
wow,
in
that's okay,
in protest for in protest the
right,
Labour Party,
right,
Jeremy Corbyn, who was then heading it,
right,
um, in objection to that event.
right,
So
right,
that was definitely, I mean, hopefully, precedent for Hindu organizations in this country,
right,
actually
right,
banding together and doing more to
right,
uh, secure our interests
yeah,
effectively.
yeah, yeah, and I think that another thing which kind of plays into all of this with regard to the political involvement of the Hindu community in the UK is, I mean, like, this is just based on a few of the things which I've read, so correct me if I'm wrong.
Mhm.
But in a way, do you feel that the British Hindu community is seen as generally more well adjusted, more of a kind of model minority than other groups, than other ethnic minorities, especially like Pakistani Muslims, and Bangladeshi
Mhm.
Muslims? Yeah.
So, yeah, absolutely.
Right.
We are.
Right.
Um, yeah, and I think, I mean, in more kind of recent times, I'm becoming a bit more critical of that than I previously would have been.
Okay. Right.
Just in the sense that yeah, the kind of I guess to put it kind of bluntly, just kind of seeing things through a kind of like a nice guys finish last kind of lens.
Right.
Um,
Right.
so yeah, we do have that kind of uh, sort of a tagline associated with us,
Right.
um,
Right.
which is I guess we naturally do tend to kind of get on quite
Right.
well with others,
Right.
um,
Right.
and
But
just
but
kind
you
of
but you feel that but you feel that there's a need for assertiveness at this point.
there's definitely a need for assertiveness at this point.
Right.
Um, I mean, what kind of form that assertiveness takes, I it's that's think only it's difficult to to see right now
Right.
exactly what that looks like, but um, there definitely is a need to at the very least, to actually raise objections
Right. Right.
uh, to more than just the aforementioned
Right.
Labour Party manifesto thing
Yeah.
I mentioned,
Yeah. But
because
yeah, go on.
I was just going to say, there's I guess there's plenty more for us to be or I think at least we have the potential to if overall we are deciding to that the Labour Party doesn't represent our interests, then we need to be thinking about how to actually leverage
Right.
our numbers, which actually is quite is I think we only make up 1.5% of the
Yeah.
UK population, but
Right.
that is at least in uh, at the kind of local uh,
Right.
electoral ward
Right.
level,
Right.
that does give us the potential of being kind of
Of course.
having the
Yeah.
power to kind of swing things in
Right.
places. So
Right.
I think
True.
it's perhaps time that we start thinking, uh,
Right.
have thinking in terms of
Yeah.
uh, how we actually make ourselves heard overall, because
Right.
there's obvious consequences to not doing that.
Right. Right. I actually remembered this quote by a Greek philosopher. I don't know if this was, I think, Socrates or Aristotle or someone. So the quote
Uh,
basically goes like, uh, the price that you pay for staying away from politics is that you end up being governed by your inferiors.
right,
Right. Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, so I mean, and it makes a lot of sense that you could be the most law-abiding community, you could be the smartest bunch of people out there, but if you do not take an interest in politics, that does not mean politics will not take an interest in you, right?
Yeah, absolutely correct.
Yeah, so I mean, and on a related note to what you said about the Hindu community now, this recent Kashmir issue acting as a kind of catalyst. But do you feel that the younger generation of Hindus, which is also facing the same kind of like social alienation, the kind of same kind of urban anomie, and these the postmodern uprootment which happens, like, of the individual, right? The individual kind of gets atomized, right? Because
Mhm.
you have like a 9 to 5 job, you have your daily commute, everyone is living in a whatever, like a studio apartment and all of those kind of
Right.
things, right? So the individual becomes like a unit in himself or in herself, right? And
Mhm.
this sort of disconnect between the community and the family and the individual is already something which is really affected the for example, the strength of Christianity in most Western countries, including the UK.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm sure, like, most young, like, white British people are actually not practicing Christians at this point.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
so yeah, so do you feel that the same kind of social forces are also having a very big impact on the young members of the British Hindu community?
Yeah, absolutely. Those forces are having a very very profound effect, actually.
Right.
So
Right.
I can obviously relate. I mean, things have become in many respects a lot more extreme. These kind of forces have
Right.
only kind of increased in strength.
Right.
In the last decade, but
Right.
uh, obviously, they were very much there even
Right.
when I was in my childhood. So I know that I was very much kind of conditioned to see myself as just an individual, you know,
Right.
kind of
Right.
separate from family, from
Right.
you know, from tradition,
Right.
um, and uh, you know, as pretty much as though you know, my kind of like fulfillment of my own desires was the only thing that really
Right.
uh,
Right.
mattered in many respects.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And the really terrible thing is that this thing, far from being, a solely Western phenomenon, it's become like a truly global phenomenon, right?
it has.
Yeah, even in India, like right now, uh, there's been an absolutely rapid increase in how young people do not feel connected with their culture or with their traditions anymore. There's an
Yeah.
absolutely massive increase in the number of people who actively call themselves atheists or
Mm.
agnostics, right? So and this is happening in India. I think even much more, because I mean, if you look at the Western countries, this process has still taken, like, several centuries to really come about. But
Yeah.
in India, it's happening over a matter of decades.
Right. Right. You know, and I think, you know, one of the biggest kind of safeguards that I have against that is actually, you know, having ample evidence around me, you know, over here of the kind of
Right. The
consequences
end result
of
of.
that thinking.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, no, and yeah, I'm very aware, you know, of I have a lot of friends in India who I'm, you know,
Right.
I talk to on a semi-regular basis, and
Right.
I know that they're know that they're very much so I mean I see how this I'm kind of seeing real time in some respects, you know, how this
Right.
exposure to this thinking is kind of you know, is again basically forcing or giving them a lot of
Right.
things to grapple with, you know, and
Right.
um yeah, in many cases is actually um you know, is actually kind of winning over them, you know. So
Right.
um so I guess, you know, I think, you know, a big part of me wanting to actually podcast with you was to actually, I guess, you know, provide them with a bit more of a
Right.
you
Right.
know, a bit more kind of context to
Right.
uh, you know, things
Right.
from, yeah, from the perspective of somebody
Right.
who's been, you know, very much like immersed
Right.
in all that,
Yeah.
um, to actually be able to um, say, look, there's, you know, because I've been kind of like knee deep in it in many
Right.
respects, you know, like
Right.
in you know, in my adolescence and whatnot. So
Right.
um, and you know, overall, I don't think it's a sensible path to tread down, you know. So
Right. Right.
um,
Yeah, man. I,
so
I,
so
I absolutely like. I think people. I think it's really great that you're the one who's actually putting it out there. That look, folks, it's not all glamorous and glittery as it seems from the outside, right? Because people, especially the youth, right now, they have this sort of weird idea, which is really been fed to them through mass media, that
mhm,
that life in London and Paris is all about partying and pubbing and going out in fancy cars and and stuff like that, right? And 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 you actually telling them that that uh, all of this materialism, it actually leads to nowhere. There is no, like, end to this hedonistic treadmill, as they call it.
right, yeah, no, yeah, absolutely, man. I've got a lot of, yeah, I've even had friends over here who are from, I would say quite traditional families who've effectively, um, who I've, yeah, who I've seen, um, yeah, who I've seen, effectively, um, you know, yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking of a particular friend actually, so this same friend who got me involved in this Hindu Swayamsevak Sangh
Right.
Shaka.
Right.
He actually, I met with him recently, and
Right.
um, he's from quite a traditional family.
Okay.
But, he's been working in the corporate world for a couple of years.
Right.
He this time and the previous time I met with him, sometime last, or in fact 2 years ago, it'd been a long time
Right.
since him. He said something to the effect of, "Oh, I sold my soul, like, basically,
Right.
and I don't know. I mean, to me, it very much seemed like, even though it's something that people just say jokingly, I felt like there was a lot of uh, truth in it.
Right.
Truth in it,
Right.
having seen that, he's somebody who came from quite a traditional family. His lifestyle
Right.
is very overall,
Right.
very hedonistic now.
Right.
His kind
Right.
of overall motivation is just, the
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
fulfillment of his material, desires. So
Right.
it's it's quite, it's quite alarming to see it, to see it, like, people on that trajectory from,
Right.
um,
Yeah.
being quite traditional to, yeah, I
Right.
think I would say descending into,
Right.
um,
Yeah.
the entirely different.
Yeah.
Uh, but for me, having come from, I'd say quite a non-traditional background overall,
Right.
um, I'm in a sense, I've been going in the opposite direction for the last uh, few years, and
Right.
I can say confidently that, I'm a lot. Uh, I mean, my life is, it's a lot better.
Right. Right.
It's what it was before. I have a lot more.
Right.
Uh, a lot more about me overall. Like,
Right.
I don't know how to, I
Right.
guess, qualify it, but people, anyone who'd seen me a few years ago would be able to say that I've, compared to now, would have no hesitation in saying that I've, changed for the better.
Right. Right.
In terms of, just being overall, I think a lot more of a a lot more of a, kinder and empathetic person, being a lot
Right.
more confident, being a lot more,
Right.
uh, I don't know, just, kind of willing to, um,
Right.
take, I mean, not just kind of, yeah, in a sense, yeah, a lot more kind of courageous, more kind of, uh, willing to take, measured risks in a sense,
Right.
is,
Right.
and, overall just a lot more, satisfied um, with
Right.
my life, Yeah, just overall, like, a much more better attitude towards, like, wealth,
Right.
like, I feel like, a lot more capable of, generating wealth now,
Right.
um,
Right.
because, I'm thinking a lot more long term,
Right.
um, I would have been previously, so I'm a lot more actually, like, what do you call it? Like, somehow it's, somewhat like, paradoxical, right? Because,
Right.
um, before, when I was kind of very much like immersed in materialist
Right.
thinking,
Right.
um, I'm basically a lot more capable of, like, making money now than I
Right.
was before, and a lot, like, have much more, like, of a better
Right.
attitude towards it.
Right. Right.
Um,
Like even though you don't see money as the end goal anymore.
exactly.
Right. Right. I mean, yeah, that is quite paradoxical, man. And it's for the better actually. It can and this kind of like a personal story which you have, right? Is it can really serve as an example for a lot of other young people out there who also, because I guess, especially in comparison to the West, because in India is not really a country where even half decent paying job is easy to come by, right?
Mm.
So there is that kind of attitude that in general people do have in India, where you're constantly chasing after money, and constantly trying to switch jobs to get the next better paying job and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then again, at the end of the day, that entire process has to have some sort of bigger purpose, right?
Absolutely.
It can't just be that when I get this job which pays me twice as much, I'm going to buy a new car, or I'm going to take out a home loan or whatever, right? Because there's no end to it. You can always get a bigger house. There will always be a better car to buy.
Hmm. Yeah,
So
that's right.
right,
Yeah, you have. Yeah, exactly. For me now, as you said, it's not money is not the end goal.
right,
And it's more of just a kind of a, it's just a kind of a consequence of having, I guess, what I would consider to be, um, like, I guess, ambitions which are actually, um, I guess, very, very much holistic in a sense, like,
right,
just, I see money as a kind of a means of being able to,
right,
um, put my, values into practice, in the sense of actually, being able to,
right,
uh, do more for the benefit of, like our people
right,
in whatever way I can.
right.
So, um, because yeah, money is part of that equation.
Of course, right,
Mm.
right. Yeah, so Sood, it was really nice talking to you about the experiences that your families had in the UK, and those which you've personally had growing up. And I'm like especially like thankful to you, and I'm sure like a lot of people in the audience will also be thankful to you for providing a great deal of insight into life in general, in terms of how people have so many different experiences, and especially considering the situation that we are in, we don't really value these things as much, because people here back home might see Hinduism as just another thing, or they might see their Indian culture as just another thing which is all pervasive, right? But maybe it just takes that experience that you have in a different society, when it's something that is not all pervasive, when it's something you have to seek out on your own, which
Mm.
really teaches you the value of what your people have. So really, thank you for being here, man.
It was such a pleasure, man. I'm so happy that we could
Right.
do this. And yeah, I've been, a big fan of, your Twitter feed. That's when how I first
Right.
came to know about you, and
Right.
your videos,
Right.
especially. You're doing some really good, important work. So,
Thank
um,
you.
this is, I'm really happy that
Right.
that we could do this. And
Right.
um, yeah, I think it's this. As I said to you when um, we first discussed this idea of podcasting together.
Right.
I think it's important that we um, that these conversations are taking place between
Right.
Hindus in India and diaspora Hindus, because
Absolutely.
um, we have a lot to learn from one another effectively. And we
Absolutely.
are we we are in many respects suffering similar predicaments. And
Right.
I
Right.
think it's time for us to start thinking of ourselves as a global
Yeah.
community, because
Yeah.
uh, yeah, long term our interests are just
Right.
they're one and the same.
Right.
And
Right. Absolutely, man. Maybe this particular podcast, this particular episode, maybe that springboard which acts as kind of like a precursor to maybe for future episodes, or maybe other maybe bigger YouTube channels will also try to do more of these things. So
mhm.
that we can have like more conversations like this between the diaspora and between the native Hindu community here. So, anyways, thanks again, man. We'll conclude with that. So thank you once again for being here.
Oh,
And
yeah, no, most welcome. Thank you.
yeah,